Central, were the bullets recovered from the bodies of Vardis and Lily Hammond so DNA coded?
Yes, Judge Magruder. It could not be otherwise.
And what was the result of the computer check of the DNA coding on those bullets?
The DNA is a perfect match for Judge Joseph Dredd.
It's a lie! The evidence has been falsified! It's impossible! I never broke the law! I am the law!
We have no case!
You gotta believe me! You have to believe me. Say it.
Your Honor, the prosecution rests.
The legal system and the criminal justice system are broken. The problem is, because of so much going on in the world, we tend to overlook many of the incidents that happen so much closer to home. Yeah, the lack of eyes on this type of news means that many cases will go unresolved, with innocent people suffering and guilty people literally getting away with murder. And yesterday I saw a news report on TV, and that prompted me to make this video. People's rights are being eroded daily, and there's not enough being done to fix the problems. I think we can all agree that a paedophile receiving a suspended sentence is wrong, but I also think we can agree that although punishment needed, 12 years in prison is way unproportionate for a bike theft. But this is what we're faced with our broken system. On the 1st of February 2019, gov.uk published a press release titled 30 Years of the Unduly Lenient Sentence Scheme, which was a scheme that allowed some Crown Court sentences to be reconsidered at the Court of Appeal in order to establish a harsher sentence for the offender. Launched in 1989 following public outcry over a series of controversial sentencing decisions, the scheme has helped hundreds of victims and their families get justice, with 137 criminals having their sentences increased under the scheme in 2017. This was originally for crimes such as GBH, causing death by reckless driving, rape, manslaughter, other serious sexual offences and serious assaults, among others, and over the past 30 years has expanded to include threats to kill, child cruelty, people trafficking, modern slavery, racially and religiously aggravated offences, and was extended yet again in 2017 to cover a range of terror-related offences. Now, this scheme means that only one person needs to ask for a sentence to be reviewed for it to be considered. Further requests of consideration will not lend any extra weight, as a decision to refer a sentence as too low can only be based on the legal threshold. Now, the unduly lenient sentence scheme allows victims of crime, prosecutors and members of the public to ask for certain Crown Court sentences to be reviewed by the law officers, and if they think the sentence is far too low. If the law officers consider the judge to have made a gross error in sentences, then they will ask the Court of Appeal to review the sentence. Now, this is a great piece of legislation, I'm sure you'll agree. I mean, just take a look at this, for example. Appeal ruled out over police officers' indecent image sentence. And this was published on March 19th, 2019. The Attorney General's Office has decided not to appeal the sentence given to a shamed former West Midlands Police Inspector Lee Bartram to the Court of Appeal. Dave Thompson, the Force's Chief Constable, called the decision to suspend the jail term handed down to the 44-year-old who admitted being in possession of indecent images too lenient. Now, it doesn't say it, I don't think, in this article, but this guy had over 450 indecent images of children on his mobile device. Mr. Thompson called for it to be reviewed and argued he was sentenced to 16 months in jail, suspended for 2 years, having been convicted of possessing indecent images of children and misconduct in a public office. Now, it also says in other news reports that not only did he possess indecent images, but he physically made indecent images of children as well. Now, the public expect the protection of the police and do not expect officers to break the law. This case is very serious, and the sentence, in my view, is too lenient for such crimes. West Midlands police officers discussed with the Crown Prosecution Service the possibility of appealing against the sentence. The matter was passed to the Attorney General's Office for final decision, and it has now been revealed that the request has been rejected. The CPS confirmed the Attorney General's Office have decided not to refer the sentence of Lee Bartram to the Court of Appeal. Bartram of Busselholme Lane, West Bromwich, was given a suspended jail sentence by Judge James Burbridge or Burbage QC, sitting at Wolverhampton Crown Court. The Attorney General's office said it would only refer sentences for appeal if it was felt there had been a gross error made by a judge. A spokesperson for the Attorney General's office said a referral under the unduly lenient sentence scheme to the Court of Appeal can only be made if a sentence is not just lenient but unduly so, such that the sentencing judge made a gross error or imposed a sentence outside the range of sentences reasonably available in the circumstances of the offence. The threshold is a higher one and the test was not met in this case. Now, hearing that news report and how the Attorney General's office have decided not to refer the sentence of Lee Bartram to the Court of Appeal, does that not instill fear into you? How can somebody with these tendencies be allowed to walk free from a court without serving any time, any punishment, when his victims will likely have to suffer mentally and psychologically for years, if not for the rest of their lives? This alone shows how broken our system is and how dangerous the ignorance of the general public can be. Now let's have a look at the flip side of the coin. The unduly lenient sentence scheme is a polar opposite of the IPP, or the Imprisonment for Public Protection scheme. The IPP sentence was a form of indeterminate sentence introduced by Section 225 of the Criminal Justice Act 2003, which came into effect from 2005. However, it was abolished in 2012. The abolishment of IPPs did not affect people who were already sentenced, and there was no sentence conversion or automatic release for people already on the sentence. IPP prisoners who were already serving will still need to satisfy the parole board that they are no longer a risk to the public before they can be released. Indeterminate sentences were introduced on the understanding that rehabilitation treatment would be made available to those prisoners concerned, but due to the system being swamped by prisoners without fixed release dates after the indeterminate sentences were introduced in 2005, and the system abusing that then new legislation, which saw at one point almost 7% of the entire prison population being made up of IPPs. The European Court of Human Rights ruled IPPs arbitrary and unlawful, going on to say that prisoners had no realistic chance of accessing the rehabilitation courses that they needed to qualify for release. This has left nearly 2,500 IPP prisoners still serving sentences for crimes that, as I've already said, should be punished for, but have been punished disproportionately. And what brought this to my attention was this report in yesterday's news, 10th of April 2019. Manchester bike robber jailed at 17 gives up hope of release. A man who remains in prison after he was jailed, aged 17, for stealing a bike has given up hope of being released, his family have said. Wayne Bell was given a now obsolete type of indefinite sentence for robbery in 2007. Now 29, he has suffered a mental breakdown and feels trapped after being repeatedly turned down for release, his relatives said. The parole board said it was handling cases as quickly as possible. Mr. Bell received the Imprisonment for Public Protection, IPP, sentence in 2007 after he was arrested for taking a bike from a boy he assaulted in Withington, Manchester. He was told he would serve a minimum sentence of 4 years for the crime. Mr. Bell's father, Carl, said his son had gone before the parole board every 2 years, but had been denied release for a number of reasons. His son has been unable to access courses to tackle issues including anger management because they were oversubscribed, he said. Mr. Bell says his son had been an easy target for other inmates, which has led him to becoming involved in fights and further hampering his release. We are all hoping, but Wayne has given up. He's 29 years old now and has no life. He said the abolition of IPP sentences in 2012 had come too late for his son and called on the government to release him. Introduced in 2005, IPPs sentenced offenders to a minimum term set by a judge, after which they could apply to the parole board for release. At one stage, there were 6,080 IPP prisoners in England and Wales, representing 7% of the total jail population. The parole board may only approve release if it believes an offender is safe to rejoin the community. IPPs were abolished in 2012 after it emerged that they were being used more widely than intended and in some instances for low-level crimes. The Howard League for Penal Reform has called on the government to urgently review the detention of IPP prisoners who have served their minimum tariff. Former Home Secretary David Blunkett has expressed regret that the sentences brought in while he was in office have led to injustices. Witherington MP Jeff Smith said this example highlights that IPPs were completely unsatisfactory. The parole board has said it had made significant progress in cutting IPP prisoner numbers to 2,489 as of June 2018, and the spokesman added, while a number of IPPs remain in the system, we are working to progress as many as we can when it is safe to do so. The Ministry of Justice spokesman said all such prisoners who have served their tariff have the opportunity to apply to the Independent Parole Board and demonstrate that they are no longer a threat to society. However, it's just said in that same article that people are not being able to access the courses that should be on offer to these people in order to help rehabilitate. So it kind of seems a moot point to say that, you know, all such prisoners who have served their tariff have the opportunity to apply to an Independent Parole Board. The parole board will only agree to their parole, to their release, if they're able, you know, if they've completed certain courses and rehabilitation tasks while they're in prison. And if they can't access those, then there's no way they're going to be released under that legislation. But the problem doesn't end there. There are multiple examples of how the system is broken. Simply look at my own videos on my channel, or those channels listed on my channels tab in my profile, and you will see how this broken system is being played out almost every single day, with law-abiding citizens being harassed, hounded, arrested, assaulted, and how these people in authority get to play with our lives with almost complete immunity of the law themselves. And just a couple of extra examples here. So this is from 10th of February 2019. Mother of 38 is arrested in front of her children and locked in a cell for 7 hours after calling a transgender woman a man on Twitter. A mother was arrested in front of her children and locked up for 7 hours after referring to a transgender woman as a man online. Three officers detained Kate Scotto at her home before quizzing her at a police station about an argument with an activist on Twitter over so-called dead naming. The 38-year-old from Hitchin, Hertfordshire, had her photograph, DNA and fingerprints taken and remains under investigation. More than 2 months after her arrest on December 1st, she has had neither her mobile phone or laptop returned, which she says is hampering her studies for a master's in forensic psychology. Writing on online forum Mumsnet, Mrs. Scotto, who has also been served with a court order that bans her from referring to her accuser as a man, claimed, "I was arrested in my home by 3 officers with my autistic 10-year-old daughter and breastfed 20-month-old son present. I was then detained for 7 hours in a cell with no sanitary product, which I said I needed before being interviewed, and later released under investigation. I was arrested for harassment and malicious communications because I called someone out and misgendered them on Twitter." Confirming the arrest, Hertfordshire Police said, "We take all reports of malicious communication seriously. It's a shame, Hertfordshire Police and every other police force, that you don't take other forms of crime seriously, like the serious crime." The case is the latest where police have been accused of being heavy-handed in dealing with people who go online to debate gender issues. Sitcom writer Graham Lynham was given a verbal harassment warning by West Yorkshire Police after transgender activist Stephanie Hayden reported him for referring to her by her previous names and pronoun on Twitter. Well, I mean, that's West Yorkshire Police. I mean, you know, I don't think I need to say much more about that. It was complaints by Miss Hayden that led both to the arrest and injunction against Mrs. Scotto. High Court papers obtained by the Mail on Sunday detail how Mrs. Scotto is accused of a campaign of targeted harassment against Miss Hayden, allegedly motivated by her status as a transgender woman. The papers claim that as a toxic debate raged online over plans to allow people to self-ID as another gender, Mrs. Scotto tweeted defamatory messages about Miss Hayden. She's also alleged to have used accounts in 2 names to harass, defame and publish derogatory and defamatory tweets about Miss Hayden, including referring to her as male, stating she was racist, xenophobic and a crook, and mocking her as a fake lawyer. Mrs. Scotto denied harassing or defaming Miss Hayden and said she holds a genuine and reasonable belief that a human cannot, practically speaking, change sex. But Deputy Judge Jason Coppell, QC, issued an interim injunction that bans her from posting any personal information about Miss Hayden on social media, referencing her as a man or linking her to her former male identity. Mrs. Scotto last night declined to comment. Now, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely crazy that people can be arrested and, you know, charged or investigated for their beliefs. I mean, let's look at things like Islam. There's a lot of people that believe in Islam and they support Islam. Generally speaking, these people aren't arrested for supporting Islam or for believing in Islam. The same as Christians and Catholics and Jewish people and, you know, all these other religions, for example. It's a belief. And if you have a genuine and reasonable belief that a person cannot, practically speaking, change sex, and that's your belief, then why are you not allowed to voice that belief? Why are you not allowed to, you know, to share your opinion with regards to that? This is another indication of the broken system that we're living in. And one more example. Now, this is from a couple of months ago. This is from, well, there's no, there we go, from the 4th of February 2019. Tree protesters, okay, campaigners who were wrongfully detained while protesting against tree felling in Sheffield have been given a £24,300 payout by South Yorkshire Police. Oh, there's Yorkshire Police again. Doesn't look good for them, does it? The 7 protesters were arrested between November 2016 and February 2017 and detained for up to 9 hours under an obscure trade union law that was incorrectly used. The police watchdog found last year. Protesters have accepted the payment, which came in an out-of-court settlement, but say they would rather have been given an apology. This is about the right to peacefully protest. The police are very good at using taxpayers' money to get out of sticky situations instead of getting it right in the first place. We just want an apology and an explanation, said Dr. Simon Crump, one of the protesters who was arrested in 2016. Now, the protesters are now pushing for an independent inquiry into the arrest, which they believe were an intimidation tactic to stop them from protesting. Their arrest and detention were deemed inappropriate following an investigation. Hang on a minute, before I carry on here. So these guys are protesting. Now, I would argue that people who self-identify as whatever sex they want to self-identify as, who then share that opinion online and argue their case against other people, that is a form of protesting. It may not be a group of people, it may be one person who is arguing their point, but that is still a protest as far as I'm concerned. So and I'm not just, by the way, I'm not just targeting people and targeting people that are, we're talking about sexual identity here. I'm not talking just about those people. I'm talking about everybody who has an opinion on something, who wants to voice that opinion, and when something comes along that conflicts with that opinion, you have, you know, this protest, if you like, which is standing up for what you believe. So why is it people can do that and get people thrown in prison, get people arrested and thrown in a jail cell for several hours, and yet other people cannot do that? So this is a complete imbalance of justice here, and it shows the way that the government are swaying at the moment. You know, they're completely out of sync with reality, and you know that it's like all of the original foundations of law are being forgotten, and it's like they're making things up as they go along now. You know, the Magna Carta, common law, these are things that are, you know, these are fundamental around the globe. It's not just here in the UK that you know, considers this common law sort of scenario. You know, don't do anybody any harm, don't kill anybody, don't relieve somebody of their property unlawfully, you know. But to relieve somebody of their freedom because of their belief is inherently wrong, absolutely. And then to allow other people to do exactly the same but get away with it, absolutely crazy. So this article goes on to, their arrest and detention were deemed inappropriate following an investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct. The protesters were arrested for the prevention of harm and injury under an obscure clause of the Trade Union and Labour Relations Act. Now, I was actually arrested. It actually states in my custody records that I was arrested to prevent harm and injury as well. And that was for me taking photographs. So I don't think that was a Trade Union and Labour Relations Act, I don't think, but Never mind. But anyway, in a statement, South Yorkshire Police said the upheld appeals were not based on an error in law, and rightly no officers were found to have a case to answer for misconduct. No formal apology was requested as part of the civil claim. The arrests are the result of a row between protesters of Sheffield City Council over a controversial tree felling programme, during which the council took out an injunction to prevent activists from taking direct action. It kind of just goes on here to explain about the fact that Sheffield Council were looking to cut down X amount of trees. And don't get me wrong, I think that you should stand up for what you believe in. Absolutely, you should stand up for what you believe in. I don't think you should be arrested for your beliefs unless you are led to action, to take action on those beliefs which undermine the fundamental human rights of other people, not made up human rights that have since been brought into legislation to keep people happy. Now, this will never change unless we start to question these laws, these acts and these statutes and the legislations, most of which are now used to control us rather than keep us safe and protect us. Our society is being corrupted from the very top. Many people think it's folk like the activists that cause the problems and that we bring it on ourselves. We hear that all the time. Those people are blind to the real world and are simply hiding behind a comfort blanket, hoping that they will not become a victim of the broken system themselves. No, it's not the activists or the protesters or anyone else who's fighting to ensure the future of our rights. It's those at the top, those in authority who, because they are left to do what they do, get worse and worse. And because they're allowed to get away with it, they continue to do it. And the problem is, the more they are unchallenged, the worse they become. Now, I'm going to link to some articles in the description for further reading and information, including the articles where I found all of my information for this video.